Good morning. I wanted to just show you what I'm seeing on these boxes this morning. It's about 8:30 in the morning. Bees are starting to work quite nicely, and I've been keeping an eye on them the last couple of days as they've been working, and I've noticed there's one specific colony here that's bringing in a lot more pollen than the others. And I just thought I would explain to you and show you what I'm seeing and my understanding and the reasons for it. It really is a benefit if you've got more than one colony, that you can assess what's going on in your apiary or just in the surroundings around your hives. They will bring in a certain amount of nectar, they'll bring in a certain amount of pollen according to their individual needs, each hive. And if you've only got one hive, it makes it difficult sometimes to distinguish whether they only bringing in nectar because there's a shortage of pollen out there, or are they only bringing in nectar because that's what the colony requires at the moment. So I'm going to just turn the camera and show you what I'm seeing here and explain to you my thinking and my reasoning for why they're foraging slightly different here. So this is the first box here, starting from the left hand side, and notice the amount of bees coming in. Very few of them have got pollen on their legs. You will see the odd one, but I haven't sat and counted bee for bee, but the numbers of them coming in without pollen, there's one with a little bit of pollen now, but the numbers of them coming in without a pollen load, and they're coming in heavy. You can see they're coming in with nectar. So this swarm is bringing in predominantly nectar at this time. There's a bit of pollen coming in again. A little bit of pollen going in there, some good pollen now. But if you notice the number of bees that are going in and out, and the number of them that are bringing in pollen is very few. Now that would make me quite concerned. Is there still enough pollen around? If I've only got one hive in an apiary, or if I've only got one hive in my garden, how would I assess if there's a pollen shortage? So it's really important to know what's going on, and if you've been following the videos, you'll know the difference between these colonies, but I will be explaining it in a second as well. And then let's move over to this one just on their left, on our right here. I'm just going to try and get out of the flight path. I want you to now notice the amount of pollen going into this hive. Almost every second bee has got a load of pollen on their legs. It's lovely to see. So that's a clear indication for me that there's no pollen shortage in our area at the moment. They're bringing in what they need. Now this particular hive is bringing in pollen, and a lot of it. It's lovely to see they're stocking up with pollen. It's really, I could really sit here all day and watch them. I love seeing how much pollen's going into these hives, or should I say into this particular hive. And even if we compare them to, if we turn the camera, these two smaller ones on the end are also not bringing in the amount of pollen that this particular one is. I'm going to come back here because, man, this is really, really lovely to see all this pollen going in. Okay, I'm going to resume it now and trying to explain to you what I'm seeing and what I'm making of why this hive is bringing in a lot more pollen than this particular hive here. Okay, now to explain to you what we're seeing here and what I'm making of this. This little colony on the end here, to me, it's bringing in a lot more nectar. Okay, so what does that tell me? It tells me that there's not as much brood rearing going on inside, and there could potentially be a problem. Why aren't they raising as much brood as potentially the other one? But because we know the history, if you've been following my videos, you'll know what's been going on here. This particular hive had a virgin queen introduced into it, so that put a halt on brood production. If you think about what went on in the scenario, all the brood hatched. There was a time when there was no open brood, so they've got massive space to fill with nectar, and that's why they're bringing in so much nectar. This queen has started laying. We saw eggs 2 days ago in here, and I would say the brood production in this hive is not as high, and so the demands for pollen are not as high as there is empty space. And the bees know winter's approaching. They know that we coming to the end of the flows around here. How they know it, that I can't tell you, but the bees know it, and they start to fill any empty cells with nectar, which they'll ripen into honey. Okay, going over to this box over here, we know that we had, if you look at the first video where we made this a double nuke, we moved the existing queen to the top. That means that there is still an active laying queen. She's busy, she's actively laying. The bees are busy superseding her, and this particular box we'll be checking later this afternoon. And we want to see, because we introduced the virgin queen into the bottom here 10 days ago today, so we'll be checking to see if that virgin queen has mated and started laying. But what's going on in here is the amount of brood that's been reared. That creates a massive demand for pollen. The bees need a lot of pollen for the proteins for the young brood. Young brood that's hatching, they require a lot of pollen for their dietary requirements and for feeding the new larvae. So that just gives you an indication of why one is bringing in a lot more pollen compared to the other one, or that's my understanding and what I make of it. It's, to me, really helpful to have more than one swarm, or more than one colony, more than one hive, to be able to compare an area, to be able to compare a flow, and to just know what's really going on. Because often you can make the presumption that there's no pollen in the area because the bees are bringing in such a little bit, but you need to know what's going on inside that hive, and you need to know why their demands are different. Is it because there isn't pollen available? You'll notice all the feeders, the sugar feeders on these boxes, are also running low. I checked them yesterday afternoon, they still had last bit in, so we'll be topping them up. I'll probably top them up later this morning. So they're getting a lot of syrup, they're getting a lot of sugar, they're getting a lot of carbs coming in, but they're lacking protein for their brood rearing. Now this box, on the other hand, isn't raising brood at the moment, so they're just storing. They're storing whatever we give them, they're storing whatever they can bring in, and as soon as that brood nest starts to normalize again, and the amount of open brood that starts to increase, so their demands will increase, and so they'll start to bring in more pollen. And we should start to see that probably in the next week or so, as we're approaching the 14 to 21 day mark, when we've got a full brood cycle in place. They should already have some open brood, and probably within the next 5 days they'll have some sealed brood already, and then that will be just starting to normalize things inside that box. Anyway, I thought I would share that with you this morning. Have a wonderful day and be blessed. Cheers.